What's up everyone, Fritz here again with another live cop, and today I've got a quick one for you as I'm going to be covering the Jordan 5 Bluebird release that happened last Thursday. Overall, the drop was a mess. The stock numbers ended up being outrageously limited. Going into the drop, right before the drop, I saw that Foot Action was supposed to have 100 total pairs. Yes, 100. And Foot Locker only had about 1K, so that really only left 1.1K total. Obviously nothing is certain when you hear about stock numbers going into drops, but going into this drop I had been anticipating and hearing that it should have had pretty good stock, and I was hearing around 5 to 10K. So needless to say, that was a little shocking when I found that out, but what are you going to do? This is yet another anecdotal piece of evidence on my end, and I mean, I'm sure you all are experiencing this too, but again, just to kind of bring this home and just relate this to real world issues, I feel like this is definitely, again, a kind of or more collateral damage from all of these shipping issues that we are having in the United States. I don't know if you all have been watching the news lately, but there are literally over 500,000 shipping containers just sitting out at sea on the West Coast waiting to get in. So that definitely is a thing that's definitely affecting stock numbers and restocks. I've covered that in other videos. But, you know, that's going to get worse as we get closer to the holiday season, so just be prepared for that. And whether that be prepared via botting, restocks, or just trying to get your inventory up, all of those would be a good idea to be on top of as we start Q4. So when I saw the numbers for the stock, I definitely pivoted. I had not planned on running for these personally, as I felt that it wouldn't necessarily be that hard to get them and I didn't know how they would do resale. But when I saw that the stock was so low, I doubled up my task count real quick. Going in, I'd only been planning on running for slots. I was running for about 25 people. But when I saw those stock numbers, I doubled up my profiles real quick so that I could run personally for myself. And in the end, I'm very happy that I ended up doing that. I did mention as I've been, progressing through this and kind of networking more that I am running slots. So if you are interested in that and having me run your information for upcoming releases, feel free to either message me on Twitter or Instagram. Both of those accounts are linked below. So if you're interested, hit me up. In regards to what happened during the actual drop, like I said, the drop was an overall mess, and I'll get into specifics of that now. When the drop started at 10, like they usually do, the only site that dropped was Foot Action. When I saw that there were only 100 pairs on Foot Action, to be quite honest, I only had about 100 or 200 tasks. So that's all I was running, so I didn't hit on there. But the one thing that I would say is that I should have kind of realized more quickly that Foot Locker wasn't dropping. I'll get into Foot Locker in a second. And that I should have ramped up the task count on there. So I didn't end up hitting on Foot Action, but again, that was the only one that dropped at the actual 10 a.m. start time. And like I said, there were only 100 pairs. And when you get down to only 100 pairs, I mean, you can be running all the tasks in the world, but at that point, it really does come down to some luck. There are obviously people out there who hit multiple pairs, but that level of stock is almost, flip of a coin. So, I'm not too upset about that. Like I said, with 100, you really can't be too hard on yourself for not hitting. But like I said, I really try to always learn something from what I'm doing, and I should have ramped up those task counts as I slowly realized that Foot Locker was not dropping and hadn't dropped. But again, if there's only 100 and I start late, you can guess the result most of the time. Now moving on to the Foot Locker portion of the drop. The big issue with this and what made this so much of a mess was the fact that Foot Locker did not drop a single pair until 10:30 a.m., which is 30 minutes after when they were scheduled to drop. This obviously throws things off because, the bots are setting up and getting in queue, ready to roll at 10. So that definitely threw things off a little bit. That definitely also led to burning a little more data while I left my tasks running. And again, if you are curious how you can see this during the drop, if you are in a cook group that has a checkout feed, you can see what bots are checking out and what sites. So that is very helpful. So that's something that you want to monitor when you're, running for shoes, so that you have a clue what's going on, what sites are dropping, how heavy the stock is on those sites, those sorts of things. But while waiting for that drop, I did leave a lot of tasks running, and by a lot I mean pretty much all of them. And I also created a couple new task groups so that I could start them a little later and see how they did. Those did end up performing a little better, so I am going to remember that in the future. But I am happy that I did end up running. I know a lot of people stopped running about 20 minutes after for Foot Locker because they didn't think it was going to drop. I found it hard to believe that the site that had 1,000 pairs was not going to drop at all. So luckily I did keep running, and that ended up benefiting me in the end. Something that I am taking away from this drop is that if I see this again in the near future where they literally are only dropping one site's pairs and aren't dropping another, I know that this happens sometimes, but the 30-minute kind of span between the two this time was a little larger than usual. So if I do see this in upcoming drops, what I do plan on doing is not stopping my tasks completely. I'm gonna go into the group, I'm gonna manually select about half of them and stop them to kind of slow down the data burn. And like I said, when I created new task groups and started them a little later, or started them right when I saw Foot Locker drop, I did hit more pairs on those task groups overall. So I am gonna try to do that in the future for the two reasons of, one, like I said, to conserve a little more data, and two, because those task groups might do a little better since they're not sitting there waiting in queue for over a half an hour before any checkouts start rolling for the feed. So again, like I said, I do try to learn something and take something away that I can apply in the future. So if I see this again, that's kind of how I'm gonna go about dealing with it. Something else I'll recommend to you all, and this is the thing that kind of allows me to go back and tell you which task groups work really well, which ones didn't, when I started them, is filming your screen. Even if you are not creating content, I would strongly suggest that you film your screen so that you have an objective picture of what actually happened during the drop. I know that after a drop, if you've been setting up all night, you might be tired, you might have work, everybody loves that post-drop nap, but you really do need a clear picture of what happened, and it gets harder to have that clear picture the farther you get away from a drop. So I would just suggest filming your screen and kind of talking to yourself during the drop about what you're thinking and what you're seeing, and that's also going to allow you to have a better idea of how you could have improved because you can hear your thought process during the drop. So just a piece of advice. And just a small analogy about that, right? I don't know how many of y'all play sports or anything, but if you play football and you are any good, you watched a lot of film. I played football in college, right? That film watching was paramount to your success, and I would really view this the same, right? If you are not able to watch yourself, it's difficult to improve. So again, I would view this as like you're watching film, but that is a critical piece to your improvement, is knowing what you did wrong and seeing it play out. If you can't see it, like I said, you kind of can lie to yourself or forget details, right? Our memory is not perfect, but that screen recording, and if you're recording your voice, that is a perfect document of what you were thinking and doing at that time. Finally, too, when you are running these foot site drops and you're starting task groups at different times, the big thing to pay attention to within those task groups, right, is which of them is actually getting into queue and which is kind of just sitting waiting. That can tell you and give you a better idea of whether or not you should leave those task groups running or if you should start new ones. And again, once you see progress in one of those categories, you can pivot from there and try to start more task groups up or just leave the ones you had running. As far as proxies go today, I did run several providers that I usually run, a lot of the private resi providers, but the only proxies that hit for me were Sakura, so shout out to them. They did hit in a few separate groups, but that was the only company's proxies that worked for me during this drop. As I mentioned, I didn't really plan on running too heavy for this drop going in, so I only had Kodai and another bot that, like, I recently have not been able to show. Sorry about that, but I did only have two of them set up. I ran Kodai and the other bot. I won't be able to show you that one, but I will say that due to bot prices, I should be buying this bot at the end of the month. So next month, you will be able to see it all. But unfortunately, again today, just due to my best interest, I'm not able to show that bot, so you will just see Kodai today. But I did run two bots, so we'll get into that footage now.